I'm sure you've heard and seen a number of articles and even videos in the media about the Great Resignation. This refers to people quitting their jobs at a higher than normal level out of frustration or being fed up or simply questioning how they want to spend their time. While this Great Resignation has taken place, 4% of Americans have actually quit their jobs due solely to crypto gains. So let's take a look at what's going on. I'm Corey, and on this channel I help you decode technology and innovation to grow your wealth on the journey to financial independence. Let's get into what I will term the Great Crypto Resignation, which is the recent survey that came out from Civic Science detailing that 4% of Americans making 50% or less have quit their jobs over the last year due to crypto gains and the financial independence that it has provided. Now you know this headline made me sit up and pay attention. I expect that we're going to see this phenomenon continue, and if I'm correct on how it plays out, the next 6 to 9 months should see a massive increase in those who are also quitting for crypto gains. But only time will tell. So let me tell you from real life experience what put me on the path to using crypto as part of a financial independence journey. In 2015, I was an associate in a big law firm representing a number of clients in the venture capital and private equity space, both domestically and internationally. So while working, I had the good fortune of working on a number of client teams with colleagues that were hardcore into crypto. And at the time, which is 2015, that really meant Bitcoin and Ethereum somewhat was coming on the scene. So back in 2015, I was very interested in the space, naturally, having work experience in the space, but I was also dealing with a ton of grad school loans and student debts, and I'm sure as many of you can relate to. So I was just curious, but I didn't really have the extra cash to really take a serious look or to get involved. So the most egregious thing about how naive I was when I think back and when I look back was that I was actually doing a lot of the work, but not actually in a financial position to be able to participate in a meaningful way because of student loans. And how many of you out there can identify with that? So let's fast forward to me plugging along, toiling away in the ivory tower, while my coworker kept nudging me about Bitcoin and later this newly launched Ethereum project. And so around that time, let's say about Thanksgiving of 2015, Ethereum had actually just launched on Kraken that previous August, so August of 2015. And at the time, one Ethereum token was about 88 to 90 cents, which is crazy when you think about it today. I didn't find out until around 2017 if we fast forward, but my colleague who kept nudging me to take a look at Bitcoin and Ethereum had ended up previously in 2015 making a 5-figure purchase of Ethereum during that late 2015, early 2016 timeframe. I later found out in 2017 when Ethereum closed the year around $750 or so, and then went on to go to about $1,300 a token back in 2018, you can imagine that I was shocked to know that somebody I actually knew, saw every day, had been involved with this space just like I was, but had taken the financial leap, had actually taken the risk and put a small position on, and it had really paid off in a big way. So in the intervening time, I left the firm for greener pastures, and my former colleague retired early. And when I say retired early, think early 30s retiring. And this was my epiphany moment, because it was the first time in my life that someone that I knew and saw and worked with every day, had lunch with, etc., had achieved financial independence in this new economy through crypto, through this new space of digital assets. I have known people, as an aside, that have invested in traditional equities purely over decades and have amassed enough money to retire comfortably. But this was the first time that someone I knew had generated wealth to walk away from the golden handcuffs of a large law firm, which many people consider to be living the dream, as Steph and Dennis have pointed out in their channel. Shout out to Steph and Dennis, by the way. Let's look at the Civic study according to Civic Science, where it found that 4% of Americans quit due to crypto financial freedom. But 11% actually of the total survey respondents reported that they'd either personally quit or they knew someone who had quit because of their crypto investments. In this case, the survey was looking at 6,741 people 18 years or older based in the United States. So the interesting thing that we learned from the survey is that when crossing over by income, the larger portion of those quitting their jobs as a result of their crypto investments were those in the lowest income bracket. This intuitively makes sense to me because the opportunity cost of leaving a lower paying job is lower than leaving a higher paying job, all things being equal. And the interesting thing is that if we add up the people that quit making less than 25K and include the cohorts making up to 25K, then the total percentage that quit by income grows drastically to 79% of those respondents. So I agree with one possible conclusion, which is that the data implies that crypto investments may have provided life-changing levels of income for some, while wealthier owners of crypto use it more as another form of asset diversification rather than a source of income. This especially makes sense when we compare this with Americans who invested their stimulus checks in Bitcoin back in 2020. So it makes sense to me that long-term investors and 401k holders would have the lowest level of participation of the respondents, because this group is also most likely to have more assets and be of a different generation of the investor. However, I think if the survey was redone as of today, there would be more long-term investors and 401k investors holding at least some Bitcoin or potentially even Ethereum or other assets, given the worldwide inflation dynamics that everyone's grappling with. Let me know in the comments what you think. Should all investors at least have some level of Bitcoin or Ethereum or at least some crypto exposure? The survey looks at respondents who were active or occasional traders on the stock market, and they're significantly more likely to have invested in crypto. So while heavier stock investors may not be quitting their job as a result of any crypto gains, they are the ones diving headfirst into the market. My gut tells me this is millennial and Gen Z demographic that have been on Reddit. However, there's no way to know 100% because the survey doesn't go into those details. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? Are you using Robinhood or Cash App or another app-based platform to trade and purchase crypto? The survey also found that traders appear to have begun shifting their original purpose and function of cryptocurrency as a whole. So for example, in the inception, the survey found that cryptocurrency and blockchain technology was really intended to provide a form of digital currency that's independent from government involvement, so protecting from some doomsday scenario like economic collapse. But in its current function, it has become more closely viewed as that of a volatile stock. And this would comport with what I see personally as well. Originally, people thought, Bitcoin over everything, and some members of the community still think that. However, increasingly folks are making a more nuanced distinction between Bitcoin as really a replacement for potentially all base money, as well as a replacement for gold, and then some of these more volatile, newer projects, even including Ethereum, as really modern day versions of plays on tech companies. So I think the survey creators missed the mark a bit on their statement, because Bitcoin specifically is not the same as cryptocurrency generally, but we get the direction of where they're going with the survey. Even today, not every company in the technology sector is trying to solve the same problems. There are enough problems to be solved for many different companies and many different players in the market. And I think the shift to holding crypto as more of a long-term investment is being reflected as more investors realize this reality versus the prior perception, which is there can be only one, and that is actually better for the broader market and general digital asset ecosystem. When we break it down by age, it becomes even more clear what I've been saying for a long time. For better or worse, there's a generational divide in crypto, with the younger generations more accepting and the older generations more hesitant. I suppose this is really just a natural phenomenon that plays out in every generation, as the new generation always sees things differently from older generations. At least now we have the hard data to show this in the case of the cryptocurrency space. Youngest demographics are much more likely to hold on to crypto as a long-term investment, while those 55 and older show much more financial risk tolerance with their preference for crypto as a short-term asset only. Those whose work was relatively unaffected by the events of 2020 ultimately report the highest levels of increased wealth over the last year as a result of their crypto investments. So likely this data implies that wealth as related to cryptocurrency may be inherently linked to some level of financial stability prior to even investing at all, which makes sense. If you have extra cash because you have a high income position, then naturally the options you have for using that cash are more varied and you have more to put to work. So this chart makes sense to me because if you have a lower income and made even a small crypto investment over the last year, you would have made larger gains relative to your wealth because you started from a smaller base. For example, going from 0 to 1 is a 100% increase. So likewise, most wealthy respondents also make a lot because they have more money to invest to begin with, and since they invested more relative to the lower cohort, their increases were larger. So to round out the group, the data seems to imply that those in the middle continue to be squeezed because they saw gains but tended to lag both the bottom and the top. And I really interpret this to mean that the middle income squeeze remains in effect in the US, which is not saying anything that everyone doesn't already know. So let's land the plane here and we can see that either 11% of the Americans either quit their jobs because of crypto gains or they know someone who did. We can also see those gains are not evenly distributed, but nothing in life is an equal distribution, at least not in a democracy. Let me know in the comments if you think we will continue to see more and more Americans invested in crypto regardless of their age, and do you think we'll continue to see quitting trend as well? Also, if you live outside of the US, what do you see amongst your friends, family, and colleagues? Are they taking the plunge in crypto? Have folks retired? Don't forget to join me on the path to decoding technology and innovation on your journey to financial independence. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Until next time,